So Janet, I want to start by asking you about something that Martha Graham was quoted as saying. And she said, every is a kind of fever chart, a graph of the heart. So I'm wondering, to start our conversation, what does Canticle for Innocent Comedians tell us about her heart?
About Martha Graham's heart. Oh, well, you'll see, even in this brand new version, that the emotion, it's just the emotion that comes through the dancing that we do. Certainly the Martha Graham classics are all about the physicality that she invented to reveal emotion, to reveal, as she said, the inner landscape, the heart. And that comes through, that was the core principle in all of her choreography. And I think it's certainly true of our new Canticle also, even though it's got a great variety of creative artists who have put it together.
I would assume that part of the tradition of keeping Martha Graham's legacy alive is to remain faithful to her heart, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's I think it's the hallmark of our company, that we deliver an incredibly powerful, gutsy, athletic style of dancing that still offers insight into who we are as human beings.
What did you learn about yourself as a Martha Graham dancer?
Oh, Lord. I started dancing with Martha when I was 20. So there was a lot to learn. One of my earliest memories with her in rehearsal was that I had what I thought was a wonderful way of standing on stage when I was standing still with a kind of a tip to my head. I mean, it's something that's quite ordinary in ballet. You see this look a lot. And Martha literally told me that I had to get my head on straight, that she wanted my head to be aligned with my spine and to the weight of my body against the earth. And it was such a life lesson that you literally putting your head on straight is also such a deep psychological awareness and message that you own your spine, you own the center of your body, you own your convictions, and that's a life lesson I'm still grappling with.
And you probably notice that whenever you tell that story to somebody, that you find them suddenly getting more erect in posture, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, now Canticle was revived in 1969 and again in 1987, I believe. What happened after 1987?
Well, it was kind of a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy, if anyone in your audience remembers what Xerox is. In 1969, now that was 18 years after the premiere of the work. The initial performances were never filmed. So 18 years later, many of the original cast came back and tried to remember what they had danced, and they put together a revival. That revival was not filmed. So in 87, another 18, 19, 20 years later, with an entirely new company, a few of the original cast came back and sort of said, well, we sort of did this, maybe we did this, let's use our collective knowledge of Martha Graham and put something together. So when I was researching bringing it back to the stage again, with no filmed record of any of those earlier efforts, I thought, it's a 42-minute work. I'm not going to pretend that we know what Martha Graham choreographed back in 1952. But we had her structure, we had her blueprint. And I thought that would be great inspiration for some of these young emerging choreographic voices. There are fabulous choreographers out there that I wanted to work with. And Martha's blueprint for Canticle for Innocent Comedians, with its 8 distinct vignettes about nature, gave me an excuse to have 8 different choreographers involved.
It seems like that's probably a problem that a lot of dance companies have, in that there is no record, there is no permanent record of choreographic works. And I'm wondering how many more pieces that Martha Graham or a Bob Fosse or anyone else has done, even living choreographers, that there's no permanent record, and there's, it becomes almost an impossible or Herculean task to try to recreate or come close to what those works were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easier and easier now for today's choreographers because video has become so inexpensive. You can do it on your phone and have a record of your dance. But certainly back in Martha's day, we're so lucky that we have films from the 1940s of some of her early works, and the 1950s. They actually made an effort to film some of the important works. But she made 181 dances, and we really only feel we can authentically bring back 50, 55 of those to the stage. So for us legacy companies, and nobody's older than us, we are the oldest dance company in the United States. So some of the other legacy companies, the Jose Limon Company, the Paul Taylor Company now, Alvin Ailey's company, they're beginning. They also have this issue with works that were created mid-century, but nobody really can touch our longevity at this point. So it's a bigger problem for us than it is for others.
Is there also a practical consideration in that the Copyright Act didn't allow choreographic works to be copyrighted until after 1978? Is there a practical consideration in being able to resuscitate these and by extension get a copyright for them to help finance, any performing arts institution?
Yes, dance copyright is a much newer field than copyright for music, for example. But it's based on the same thing, that a work must be published. And for us, that means it needs to have been filmed and released to the public. So it can't just be an archival film. So that's a high bar for dance in the decades of the 20th century. We went through a court case about copyright and about trademark that clarified these things. It was incredibly difficult for us, but it clarified these things for other companies. And I think Merce Cunningham's company, for example, took a great example, took a page from what had happened to us and got their records straight and their house in order, so that when Merce passed away, it was clear who owned his works.
Unfortunate that you have to go through that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to ask you about how the New York Times described this work in 1987. They said it was one of Miss Graham's most atypical pieces. And I'm wondering what, from your perspective, makes it atypical, or was that just one person's perspective?
No, I think it's atypical for a number of reasons. One reason that made it atypical in 1952 was that Martha Graham was not in it. The works that she was creating in the 30s and 40s and even 50s, for the most part, revolved around her. She was choosing narratives, borrowing stories from the Bible, from Greek myths, from wherever, to have a vehicle for herself as a leading actress and dancer. And it wasn't just a narcissistic trip. I mean, she often transformed these stories in genius, revolutionary ways. For example, she borrowed the Oedipus story, and she told it from Jocasta's point of view, Jocasta, his wife and mother, and she told it backwards. The curtain goes up when she's about to hang herself, after she knows the truth, and we see the whole thing in flashback. So she was revolutionary in terms of her theatrical techniques. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant that's taking us a little off subject, but so we come back to Canticle, and she's not creating a vehicle for herself. She's creating virtuosic solos and duets for her company. So it's an ensemble work. It does not have a narrative. It's no story. There's no bad guy or anything like that. So it's a much more sort of poetic and abstract idea without a leading lady at the center of it.
It also seems, and this is from a perspective from somebody who came of age, in the 70s, but it strikes me as being terribly prescient in terms of discussing the planet and the world in which we live in. Something that seems like it's even more topical today than it might have been when she first did it.
I think you're absolutely right. And also just sort of so serendipitous that this premiered on April 22nd in 1952, which is now Earth Day, but wasn't then. The 1950s are also the beginning. I've done a lot of research about this in terms of bringing Canticle back to the stage, the beginning of what is called the Anthropocene. This is the era on the Earth where man's influence is the greatest influence on the planet and on our ecology. And since the 1950s, there has been what they call the great acceleration of the heating of the Earth and the tragedy and the great threat of climate change to the environment. So our work, Canticle for Innocent Comedian, still is a celebration of nature. It is poetic, magical, to remind us all what is we're in fear of losing. Like Martha's was, the context has changed around it. But your audiences should not expect the voice of doom and gloom when they come to see this work. It's still a celebration of nature.
Well, and certainly not with the choreographers that you have involved with this piece. I mean, you're not exactly working with doom and gloom choreographers either. So when it came time to assigning a choreographer to each one of these pieces, what was the process by which you both chose the choreographers and then the decision was made to pair them with which piece?
Well, first of all, two of the vignettes have a sort of legacy to them. The one thing that was filmed of Martha's original was the Moon Duet, created by Martha Graham. So Martha is one of the 8 choreographers in the new Canticle. The Wind vignette in 1952 was danced by Robert Cohan, who took modern dance to the UK in the 1960s. He was really one of Martha's lead dancers who took to the UK, started a school, started a company of his own, and became a legend. And he danced the original Wind in Martha's Canticle. So I wrote him and said, Bob, would you be interested in creating a brand new Wind for one of our current dancers? And he agreed to it immediately. So we have Martha, we have Sir Robert Cohan. He was knighted by the Queen a few years ago. And then we have a group of today's choreographers. Sonya Tayeh is the lead choreographer in this. And she's certainly the most experienced of these because I wanted someone who had the chops to make a cohesive whole of all these vignettes. So she's created the opening, the closing, and all the interludes between the vignettes and the sun vignette. The other 5 people are young choreographers I've been following for some time. And I had an idea of their styles. Juliano Nuñez, for example, born in Brazil, works out of Germany, has an incredibly fluid, just sort of unbelievable fluidity to his movement. So I chose him to create Water, the vignette titled Water. Micaela Taylor, who's a wonderful choreographer based here in LA, has such a sort of electric isolationism. She moves different parts of her body so quickly and dynamically that I saw her for stars. And there's just a sparkle to her kind of choreography. So it really, these choreographers probably could have created any of the vignettes, but I took it upon myself to decide which style would fit most easily with nature as we know it.
Yeah, with Sonya's work, I mean, a lot of people know her now. You know, I had to look up and see that she had been involved in a television series, but you know, because I don't watch So You Think You Can Dance, but I know the work in Moulin Rouge. And she, in a 2015 interview, mentioned that in her, you know, undergrad work at Wayne State University, that she was inspired by Martha Graham, that she had been inspired by Twyla Tharp. And she described them as, both of them, as women who invented an idea and maintained it, and also evolved and changed. How much does Graham's influence allow someone like Sonya to maintain that influence, yet still change and adapt it for a contemporary audience?
You know, I think Sonya, as so many choreographers that Maratha influenced since she began her company in the 1920s, it goes back to our conversation about heart. Sonya's choreography is very emotionally descriptive, and she has her own physical vocabulary that is quite different from Maratha's, but it's still this idea of using using motion and movement to describe emotion. And Sonya is at the just one of the greatest choreographers today doing that sort of thing.
Was it important for you to see elements of Martha Graham in the work that these choreographers had been doing?
No, it was important for me to not see Martha Graham. And I didn't want things that were Graham-esque. You know, we have Graham. We have the most fabulous 20th century choreography that exists, in my opinion. So to bring someone in and ask them to do something like Maratha is just too much of a mountain to climb. I really look for people who have developed their own distinct voices and ask them to take inspiration from one of Martha Graham's ideas, but to create a completely different dance, something that is their own. They're excellent artists, everyone that we've hired for this piece, and I trust them to bring their own voice to this. I want them to bring their own voice to this.
But I guess what I was getting at was, within their voices, do you feel an influence of Martha Graham's work?
Well, you know me, I see Martha Graham's influence in everybody's voices. Even the ones who didn't like her. You know, Merce Cunningham rejected her, but I still, you know, see the emotionality in Merce's work, even though he claimed it wasn't there. So yeah, I don't think there's any choreographer today, whether they know it or not, who does not relate back to the revolution Maratha started in the 1920s and 30s.
For people who have no idea who Martha Graham was and just know Martha Graham as a name, if at all, what would you say is the important reason why people whose attention spans are limited to what they can see on a TikTok video on one of these?
Yeah.
What would you say is the reason for them to, you know, pay attention, find out who Martha Graham was and what she meant?
I think we have to go back to heart. You know, she didn't want dance to be about swans and flowers and gods and goddesses from imaginary places. She wanted to create a style of dancing that spoke to the human condition, to the inner landscape, as she said. And that's what she did. I mean, people think that's quite normal now. Anybody, and of course, dance is about us being humans. But it was Maratha that not only had this idea, she wanted to dance about the human condition, but she created a dance language that was the theatricalization of body language. So she took our naturalistic gestures, you know, sorry, I can't show you all these things on Zoom, but she took body language and she turned it into a dance language. And that was revolutionary.
The dancer can leave the dance, but the dance doesn't leave the dancer. I'm just watching you.
Yeah, somebody was watching me in rehearsal the other day. I help our dancers. I do every jump in my chair. I help them all the time. And they were saying, oh, it's fascinating to watch you help them dance. I said, don't ever sit behind me in the theater because I'm constantly bobbing and weaving.
Do you miss it?
Oh, sure. I think anybody who's ever danced misses it when they can't do it anymore.
Yeah, does your body miss it then?
Yeah. But I'll tell you, if I can't do it myself, having the dancers, today's Martha Graham Dance Company is made up of the most beautiful, incredible, powerful dancers. So if I can't do it myself, having them to do it for me is the next best thing.
That works. Now, from what I read about, at least about the revival in '87, that the piece Canticle wasn't performed fully with score, that there were moments of silence. There was also, I believe, moments where text was read. Now that you have Jason Moran in, how has that changed, or has it?
Well, we gave Jason carte blanche. You know, did not need to reflect back on the original score whatsoever, like these individual choreographers. We really only borrowed Martha's blueprint. So Jason has gone in his own direction. It's a long piece. I mean, long in a good way. It's about 40 minutes for solo piano. And Jason's playing it. He said, I had to get it into my hands because it's a tour de force for him to play for 40 minutes. We have used some silence in the score because Bob Cohan created the vignette Wind to silence. And the score that accompanies it is the sound of the dancer's feet and her breath and sort of the way she stirs up the air around her on the stage. But other than that, Jason's playing inside the piano, outside the piano. He uses it in all sorts of ways.
Yes, as a longtime fan of Jason's and having seen him perform a number of times, I've seen him manipulate a piano from every possible position.
Right.
Which is good. So I guess this is the age-old question about choreography, but how did Jason, and you could probably speak to this better, but how did he collaborate with these various choreographers? At what point did the music come first and then the dance, or I'm assuming it was a give and take?
It was a give and take, and it was different for almost every choreographer because our creative process has been stretched out over such a long time, for one reason, because of COVID. When I first hired these choreographers, they came to New York regularly. Micaela would be in New York, Juliano, Inouye is based there, the Alleyene sisters from the UK. But with COVID, it slowed everything down. And some of them had to choreograph their vignettes before Jason had started the score. So we said, you can choose a temp track if you want to, choose a piece of music that inspires you, but no, we're going to throw it away. And Jason's going to create something to replace it. The last couple, Micaela came in to create Stars after Jason already had created that sound. So she had his composition to work with. So it's been kind of a checkered, very slow building block back and forth sort of thing. Jason did not have really direct contact with any of the individual choreographers. He's been working with Sonya and me. And it's really difficult to describe, but he came into the studio several times, I think 3 times. And that you could just feel the sparks flying. Once he saw our dancers in person and sat down at the piano in our studio and just began to create sounds and phrases that went with the choreography Sonya had already created, that was when we moved the most quickly and were just most, ecstatic, inspired by this collaboration.
He's obviously, immensely talented, but there are a lot of immensely talented people to whom you could have gone to for music. What made Jason the right fit for this?
Sor Steingraber at the Soraya recommended him and recommended a few other people. And I listened to all of their various compositions and really kept coming back to Jason. Not only is his music sort of magical and poetic, which is what we wanted for Canticle, but he also leaves a lot of space in his music. And dancers need space. If there's too much music, the balance is off. We need room to have the art of dance be on equal footing, if you will, with the music. And Jason has been very collaborative in that respect, that there's room for the ideas of the dance to take center stage, and there's room for his music to come to the fore. So there's a real back and forth.
Are there any plans to record the music so that fans of Jason's can hear it?
Yes, absolutely. We're recording it not only for Jason's fans, but because we want to take this dance on the road, and Jason can't always be with us, of course. So we need a recording to dance to. We're taking it to Athens in April and to Budapest, we hope. So we already have touring planned with Canticle. And that recording is also part of a larger project that Sor Steingraber, the Soraya, and the musical ensemble Wild Up and their conductor, Chris Roundtree, are involved in to re-record a number of our classic scores from the middle of the 20th century. Many of our recordings are so out of date and just don't speak in today's technology. So we're embarking on a large recording project.
Which is terrific. Now, this is the world premiere this weekend at the Soraya. Do you anticipate learning anything from this performance that may result in some modifications before, because I know it's going to be performed also in the States, this spring. Do you anticipate the potential for any kind of alterations or changes before it ends up being in New York in April?
I think this week, the Soraya and Thor have organized this week to be an entire week of technical rehearsals, so we can do the lighting design, we can see the costumes on stage. Jason will be with us every day. Sonya is here. So I hope that all the changes will take place this week, because Jason really records it. We premiere it on Saturday, he records it on Monday, and once the score is recorded, that pretty much secures it. One thing we didn't talk about, which allows for some adjustments, is that there really are two casts of Canticle. And for some of the vignettes, we switch genders. For example, there's a man, Lorenzo Pagano, who dances the vignette of the sun in one cast, and a woman, Leslie Andrea Williams, dances it in the other. The duet Water is for two men in one cast and two women in another cast. So this allows for two marvelous casts, but it also allows us, if there are any injuries or any problems, it gives us a lot of flexibility in keeping this work on stage.
And also it allows you to do multiple performances by being able to alter the casts, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me conclude by asking you one impossible hypothetical. Let's say Martha Graham is in the audience on Saturday for the world of this new Canticle. What do you think she would have to say about what you've chosen to do and what the company is presenting on stage?
One answer is, as long as we'd ask her to bow, bring her up on stage, she'd be happy. But the other answer is, people think of Martha as a sort of old-fashioned, staid diva who wanted things a certain way. But it was quite the opposite. She was a revolutionary. She embraced change till the last day of her life and was always looking for the new. She said she had an appetite for the new, and she was always looking for ways to astonish her audience, to figure out what was new and what she could do. So I just have to believe that she would be behind us all the way, that she would be interested in the experimentation that we're doing. And I know she would be interested in these remarkable young choreographic voices that we're able to support in this commission.
And probably surprised what we've been able to take, the human body to and what it can do. It's very different than it was, when she was in her prime.
Definitely, although she lived so long, she lived until she was almost 97, that she saw dancers' bodies and facility change over the years, and she loved that and would incorporate it into her classic works, and she was sort of constantly upgrading them with what the human body could do. So I think she'd be with us all the way.
Well, sounds good. Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the performance on Saturday night.
Great.
If I see you, I will come over and say hello.
Yes, please do.
All right.
Please do.
Thank you very much for your time, Janet. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Great. Me too. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.